Yo, this is part two of What If Luffy was Frieza's reincarnation, and I'm not gonna make the same anti mistakes as last time. So here we go. Going up Reverse Mountain, the Armada they would barely survive. They would require for Luffy to stabilize all the ships with the use of his key. They would encounter Laboon on the other side, initially going in for an attack. Luffy he would actually subdue the whale's rage though with a key pulse, surprising many of his crewmates. Most were expecting for him to honestly just slice Laboon in half or something. Luffy wasn't really known for his acts of mercy after all. Crocus would sense the unnatural energy and claim that whatever Luffy had, it didn't belong to this world. Luffy would just shrug though, and say that was just too bad. He was here to stay. They'd have their encounter with some of the agents from Baroque Works, and Luffy would quickly show them that he was not one to be played with. They would be scared into leading him and his crew to Whiskey Peak. The goal was to rob the crew for everything that they had, but Luffy and Zoro, they didn't drink anything. They realized something was up about the whole situation. Instead of just being tricked by Baroque Works, the two would actually turn the tables on the operation. Luffy would expose their bounty hunter network while sending Zoro to deal with the agents. He would watch carefully as Zoro dealt with each and every single one of the agents, evaluating just how efficient he was in taking down his opponents. By the end, Luffy would be pleased by the results. Those that remained ended up surrendering and found themselves getting absorbed into Luffy's network. They would be in his next division, which would be led by Miss Monday and Mr. Nine for now. And they were likely to get replaced sooner or later, but for now he just needed a placeholder. Of the survivors, one would reveal herself to be Princess Vivi of the Alabaster Kingdom, and she would request their help. She would know that it was a foolish thing to ask, considering the circumstances, but she needed all the help that she could get against Crocodile. She would pay him back to the best of her capabilities. Luffy would think about it for a bit before agreeing to it. He had his own plans for the situation, but he wouldn't tell her immediately. He would keep that a secret for now. The group would find themselves entering a little garden where Luffy would meet the giants Dory and Bragi. They were relics to Luffy, but he had to admit, he respected the sort of warrior code that they had. Luffy would defeat Mr. 3 rather easily with a basic key blast that melted all his wax, and Mr. 5 he would get sliced down by Zoro. The two of them just agreed that he was wasting the potential of that fruit anyways, and that they could find someone else to give that sort of power to that would make better use of it. In the meantime, Luffy would actually recruit Miss Golden Week and Miss Valentine to his crew just because he could see some use of them in the future, especially Miss Golden Week. He would offer Dory and Bragi a spot in his crew too, but they would decline the offer. He would let them live though, which would, again, shock Luffy's crew considering just how murderous he was in the East Blue. Nami would end up contracting a virus though from Little Garden and need serious medical attention. This would be one of the few times that the crew would see Luffy show a face close to concern. Seeing Wapol board one of his ships without permission and immediately start chewing on it. Of course, this would royally infuriate Luffy. One death beam. That's all. That's what was needed in order to kill Wapol, and it was to the head as well. He was not gonna waste any time here. The crew they would make it all the way to Drum Island and find out about everything that had happened. They would learn that the only doctors that lived on the top of the mountain, or well, they would learn that the only doctors on the island were the ones that lived on the top of the mountain. Luffy, being able to fly, wouldn't see much of an issue with this, and he would take Nami there in his arms to be treated by Dr. Kureha. Luffy would meet Chopper in the meanwhile, and find out that he was a doctor too apparently. He was trained by Kureha, and Luffy would be intrigued by his hybrid biology. He didn't see him as a monster or anything, which would surprise Chopper. Luffy would explain to him that he was more of a monster than Chopper could ever be. He would even offer up a spot in his crew to Chopper. If anyone tried to make fun of him or treat him like an outcast, he would just blast them through the heart. Chopper would find himself weirdly gravitated towards this and agreed to join his crew. Chopper would be the head of the medicine department, looking into Luffy's biology after he explained that he didn't have a devil fruit. He wanted to figure out how this stinky called Ki interacted with living tissue and any way to make logic out of it. By the time they made it to Alabasta, Luffy would waste no time and he would just go gunning towards Crocodile. He would find Crocodile's location and brawl with the man. This was hardly a fight though. Luffy just wasn't the most accustomed to using his fists rather than beams though. Once he realized that Crocodile was a Logia user, he would hit him with ki-enhanced punches and kicks. He would be holding back tremendously to make the fight more enjoyable and to strike an immense fear in Crocodile. After beating Crocodile to a bloody pulp, he would actually choose to spare Crocodile, confusing him. He would explain to Crocodile that he was just too useful to kill. Instead, he was going to take over Baroque Works, and Crocodile, he would work directly underneath him and report directly to him. If he decided to run off on his own or anything of the sort, he would find him and he would kill him. Crocodile, he would realize that he didn't have a choice but to agree to Luffy's deal, surrendering his organization to the Frost Demon. Vivi would be enraged hearing that Luffy had spared Crocodile, wanting Crocodile to have at least be arrested and thrown and impaled down. Luffy would explain that Crocodile, he was too useful to just throw him and impale down though. He got rid of Crocodile's threat to Alabasta, so it was time for Luffy to cash in on his reward. Nami would especially be excited to hear about this, wanting to see all the riches that would have come to the crew. Vivi would try to explain that they were kind of broke right now, but Luffy wouldn't want the money. Nah, he wanted something more. That more was the throne. This would sound like complete blasphemy to Cobra and Vivi, but Luffy, he would explain himself calmly. They could continue to run the kingdom as figureheads, but they would be working beneath him. They would answer to him directly. If he said for them to jump, the only question that they should ever ask him is how high. Vivi would grit her teeth, but Luffy would offer an alternative. He could just, vaporize them right then and there, and publicly make himself known as Alabasta's new king. That would not be a pretty sight though. And they would agree. They would surrender and give in to Luffy's demands, since it didn't seem like there was a real choice in the matter. Luffy would board his ship just to find Miss Sunday on there. She would explain that she was an archaeologist that could read ancient texts from the void century. She knew how Luffy stayed and immediately made her worth known. Luffy figured that he could be using her in a pretty decent way with this information, and he would allow her to stay. She would explain that Cobra knew where some of the poneglyphs were and request to get the info from him. Luffy would agree, and they would learn about the existence and location of Pluton. It was in Wano. They would eventually head there to collect that ship. After this, Luffy's empire would have spanned multiple seas. Luffy's ambition would grow to become divine in nature. He would find himself at Jaya, talking about the existence of Skypiea. Initially, they would laugh at Luffy until Luffy had Usopp shoot Bellamy in the kneecaps. He wasn't going to deal with fools like Bellamy that had no ambition and laughed at those who did. They would find their way to Skypiea, but only use one of the ships instead of multiple. Luffy just didn't see it as necessary to bring the entire armada with him on this. Nothing in this world had challenged him as of yet, so why would this be any different? Sure enough, Luffy would be right. He would find himself challenging Enel for power. Both saw themselves as gods of this world, but there could only be one, and Luffy would clash with Enel. He would try to attack Luffy with several aerial attacks, only for Luffy to dodge each and every single last one of them. They were just too slow for him. Luffy would grab Enel by the throat, and Enel would attempt to shock him. Luffy would channel his ki throughout his body as a sort of conductor though. Doing this, it would allow him to better understand the manipulation of energy flow. He would look at Enel with a wicked look on his face, specifically his eyes, while Enel, he had a look of fear in his. Luffy, he would just be relentless in his attacks, using Enel as a punching bag until the lightning god, he just stopped breathing. Luffy would claim the entirety of Skypiea as a new division, naming it the Sky Legion. It would be led by Nganfall and the Shandians. Luffy would take as much gold as he could fit on his ship, and he was capable of using his telekinesis on top of that. Usopp would take some of the technology that the Skypians use as well with him, wanting to experiment on it and learn how to make use of it. He would take the Shandians and Ganfall with him as part of the Sky Legion to go down to the seas with them, of course. And their next stop would be at Water 7, where the crew would learn about the condition of their ships. They had the funds to replace them with all the gold that they got from the Skypians alone. The funds he got from the Baroque works in the Alabaster Kingdom weren't even put into consideration either. In truth, Luffy also just wanted a reason to get rid of the former Alvida's pirate ship. It was just always an eyesore to him. In the middle of the night though, Robin, she would end up getting kidnapped by CP9. After finding out what happened to her, he would be livid. Even more enraged when finding out that they tried to frame him for shooting an icebreak. If he really wanted the man dead, he would have been dead. Luffy and his armada, they would invade Enies lobby, going through majority of the security with ease. With the number of allies on Luffy's side here, it would have been even quicker here. Luffy would fight Lucci and defeat him rather easily, humiliating Lucci. While Luffy's combat skills weren't all that great, he made up for it with absolute power and strength. Luffy would offer Lucci a spot in his crew though, finding that the cat could be of use to him somehow. Lucci, he would just look at Luffy's hand and swat away, denying it. Instead of crashing out though, Luffy would do his best to keep his composure and just crush Lucci's chest in. Yeah. On finding out that a buster call was made by Spondum, instead of everybody fleeing to their ships, Luffy would see this as a perfect opportunity to display his absolute superior power to the world government. He would stand at the top of Enies lobby before pointing up to the sky with one finger. He would try to small blast a key in that one finger before it rapidly increased in size. Lucci, in his dying breaths, would witness this, as Luffy would manage to single-handedly erase an entire buster call. This would destroy any and all morale that any Marines that were surrounding the area still had. Luffy would laugh maniacally as he jumped off the building and landed on the Going Merry after all that chaos. Any remaining Marines would end up getting killed by Buggy thanks to his ability to split his body into multiple tiny pieces. Kobe would have witnessed all of this and realized that he was on the crew of the literal devil. He knew his chances of becoming a Marine were already slim to none, but now this twisted fate probably saved him for once, because he likely would have been in that attack if he were to have become a Marine. Although the world government would try their best to hide the news of Luffy single-handedly destroying a buster call, it would prove to be fruitless. The world would be in disarray. He would be branded as the Frost Demon Emperor after this point, unofficially being recognized as that of Yonko status. Luffy would be pleased by this, but make sure to challenge the system of warlords and Yonko alike, in order to provide no doubt in anybody's mind that he was going to be the one to bring the world into a new world order. At the end, Luffy would get his ships redone and reworked on by the Frankie family as a sort of courtesy for getting rid of CP9 as they had wronged Frankie's and Icebreak's father figure, Tom. Despite how insane Luffy was, he was also insanely powerful, and figured that this would help with staying on his good side as well. Each of the new ships would reflect on this Luffy's identity in this world. This version of the Thousand Sunny would have a frost white hull with violet energy veins and a prow shaped like a devil's head. The former the former Alvida pirates would gain a new ship that Luffy would name the Cold Queen. It would have reinforced steel ice plating, a spiked bow, and crimson sails meant for enforcement and intimidation. The Kree pirates would gain a massive fortress-like ship that borrowed some of the technology from the Skypians that Usopp would supply the Frankie family with. This meant this was meant for a heavy assault division. Luffy would name this one the Ice Age. The Skypian fleet would receive a floating aerial base with energy wings crafted from their technology. The purpose of this ship would be for reconnaissance missions and rapid deployment. The Buggy Spectre would be Buggy's new ship, and this one would be a carnival-themed warship turned nightmare vessel. The hull would be painted obsidian, with there being glowing violet runes all along it. The figurehead would be that of a grinning skull that was split in half, meant to represent Buggy's devil-fruit abilities. The deck was lined with detachable mini-boats that could also separate mid-battle. It would be meant for espionage and chaos operations. Each of these ships would bear the sigil of a frost-white skull, crowned with a halo of ki and horns to represent Luffy's past life in the mark of a new dawn. The Dawn Armada would sail through the Florian Triangle where Luffy he would sense something unusual, something wrong. They would land on Thriller Bike, where Luffy would deal with Moria's horde of zombies. He would send the crew to deal with the lightweight, while he wanted to go and find the boss of the operations. He would eventually find Moria lounging around in his mansion and question what was up with all the zombies. Moria would explain that it was his devil-fruit abilities. He could steal others' shadows and place them in corpses, which then created his undead army. Since Luffy was here too, he figured he may as well just take Luffy's shadow and use it to power the undead ores. With him on his side, he would be able to fight Kaido again and enact revenge for his lost crew. Luffy? He would chuckle before denying this. He would offer Moria the chance to join his growing empire though, but of course, Moria he wouldn't accept the offer from Luffy. Luffy wasn't going to kill Moria here, nah. Luffy found Moria's abilities to be too valuable here. He was more valuable alive than dead. That didn't mean that he wasn't going to make his existence an absolute hell though. Moria, he wouldn't stand a chance against Luffy in a fight, and he would be forced to surrender to Luffy. All of Thriller Bark would be assimilated into Luffy's empire as a result. He would meet Brook and have Moria return his shadow to him, since he wanted him on his main ship. He looked like fun to have around, and his soul fascinated Luffy as well. He was someone who defied death without the influence of Moria's fruit. He wouldn't just be a musician on Luffy's crew either. He would also be their soul guard, responsible for maintaining the morale and studying the connection between the soul and ki. Brook would accept in order to cure his loneliness. Moria would be stripped of his status as captain, and the new leader would be Perona of the zombie pirates, just to spite Moria even more. Moria was just going to be their power source from now on. There was going to be a lot of dead enemies in Luffy's conquest, so he would prefer to just add them to his team at that point. It could have become real handy, honestly, if Moria had appeared earlier on, but he couldn't control time. The Thriller Bark Island ship would serve as night patrol and intimidation factors as well. The royal government would choose not to send Kuma after Luffy here, viewing him as too much for even Kuma right now. Luffy's fleet would arrive like a storm at the Sabaody archipelago. Each of his ships would draw every eye. When witnessing the celestial dragon's arrogance, it would enrage Luffy. Their arrogance came with no power to back it up, and therefore, they were undeserving of such arrogance. Only he was allowed to be so arrogant because he had the feats of strength to back it up. As soon as he saw one trying to shoot a slave, he would vaporize the bullet and proceed to vaporize the celestial right after. This would leave the archipelago in a state of panic, since even touching a celestial was enough of an offense to have a buster call sent at you. Luffy wouldn't worry though. He had already shown that buster calls, they weren't enough for him. This is something that some other Warriors generation would remember hearing about as well, but they thought that was just a massively thrown out of proportion rumor. The admirals were prepared to intervene after this great offense, but the world government would be hesitant here. This was a first. They hadn't dealt with such power like Luffy's before. He had proven in the Enies Lobby incident that he was beyond their control. After some consideration, they would decide that the admirals were on a whole different level of power though, and send them after all. They would choose to send all three admirals just to make things clear that there were levels to this world system. And Luffy, he was not going to be an exception. Luffy would find himself surrounded by the three admirals. Each would send their own attacks at Luffy, but Luffy, he would just duck, dodge, and redirect several of their attacks. To the shock of the supernovas, Luffy was holding his own against the admirals. It was a ridiculous sight to behold, and it mocked the world government even more when they began to realize that the admirals, they were starting to lose. The world government was getting embarrassed, so they would dispatch the pacifista prototypes, which Luffy, he would just destroy them effortlessly. He would have the energy cores be the only thing left behind, since he wanted his crew to take a look at this technology for him. He would play around with the admirals for a bit longer before doing the dash on them, leaving Sabaody with his crew. They would come back later to get the coding. For now, Luffy would use his last moments on Sabaody to burn a message into the ground stating that their world was obsolete. It was meant to be a chilling message, and with everything that Luffy had done within just 1 year of being a pirate, people would begin to think that maybe he was onto something. The world government was beginning to see Luffy as the resurrection of rocks. When Luffy finds out that Ace is captured though, he would not waste any time to go claim him. His fleet would descend from the sky through the use of Luffy's key. It would be led by Luffy's command ship, and each ship after followed behind. The battlefield would be forced to acknowledge Luffy's presence when his feet touched ground. Luffy would be recognized as an emperor by Whitebeard after hearing about all of Luffy's accomplishments in the news. Whitebeard would warn the admirals that Luffy, he was not fighting for freedom here, but dominion. Luffy would go after Akainu since he had the most destructive route of the bunch. He'd clashed with Akainu for a while, but not really taking it all that serious. Akainu knew he couldn't beat the boy either. He was already able to hold his own against the admirals back at Sabaody. He had never felt so embarrassed. He wasn't going to quit though, and just let the wood do whatever. If anything, that could have been a fluke. Luffy would prove that, yeah, that was not a fluke. In the clash of magma and ki, Luffy would gain the edge over Akainu. This was still him showing less than a fraction of his full power, by the way. This body still couldn't handle the fullest extent of his real power anyways. Not like he really needed to in this world. In the end, he would not necessarily kill Akainu, but he was being merciful. He would leave him in shambles, scarred and pride ruined, with his display of strength. He would look on at Ace and force him to join him. Whitebeard, hearing this, would react very violently, but Luffy would simply look at the old man with apathy. He was knocking on death's door anyway. If anything, he would have the entirety of Whitebeard's crew assimilated into his own after everything, but he would decide not to. Not now, at least. This was his act of mercy. He would let Ace go back to the Whitebeard pirates for now, since he planned on coming back after Whitebeard had died anyway. After the results of Marineford, Luffy would have all of the Marines evacuate the area. This was his last act of mercy for them. This world had made him go soft with all these mercy calls. Those that tried to defy Luffy would get a death beam through the chest, and Luffy would have his men remake Marineford, turning it into his new capital for now. He would have his men do extensive research on the technology of this world and learn to combine it with the theory of Ki that he would teach them, since he was the only one in this world that seemingly used it. Over time, the divisions would command their own fleets, forming their own fleets as well, and using the technology that Luffy had them research and reverse engineer. They would have their own global network of control, and the world's balance would just completely collapse after that point. Any Yonko that tried to challenge Luffy's reign would be beaten to an inch of their life and surrender both their crews and territories to Luffy, further expanding his empire at an exponential rate. The Marines would try to rebuild, terrified of what Luffy's next move would be, but this would be pointless. The Celestial Dragons would be forced to hide in terror once Luffy stepped foot on top of the Red Line one day, claiming that they were being evicted. His new world order would have those that proved their worth and loyalty to Luffy living at the top, and that did not include the Celestial Dragons. Luffy's final declaration would be that he was not the Pirate King, nah. He was something a little bit more. The King of the world. As time went by, the world would just speak less and less about Marines and pirates, instead speaking solely of the Frost Demon Empire. Imu would try to challenge Luffy, only to realize that such endeavors were pointless. It didn't hold a candle to Luffy in strength. Luffy would make sure to gather the ancient weapons as well, to rid the world of any ideas of Holmes out dethroning him. And that is basically how it ends, y'all. This is Apollo signing out. Y'all know what to do. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Peace.